The next story is a true one that happened to me personally. It might sound a little crazy, extraordinary, supernatural, you name it. It all happened back when I was 15 years old. It was Friday, late afternoon. I was walking outside when this very strong wind suddenly blew, and the lightning from the sky started striking before me, and the water in the canal next to me started gushing in a tube-like stream, and the earth beneath me started quaking. And these four elements started to violently fuse together to the point that the giant trees next to me almost got uprooted and swallowed by this mini black hole that suddenly spawned. But eventually, this violent and relentless fusion settled to reveal what it has created, which is the phone that I'm filming with right now. And this is how I came to obtain my phone. Sounds unbelievable, no? Let's get into it. As absurd and as irrational as this story might have sounded to you, but I believe you don't feel as disturbed when you hear that some people believe that this magnificent universe is the result of a mere coincidence. So let's take a step back to think about the odds of each story being true. If you can believe that Mother Nature decided for some reason to grant me this phone with not very great potentials and features, then how are you going to convince me that this magnitudinous universe is the creation of a mere non-existent cosmological coincidence? Think about it again. This universe, with its great magnitude and all of these inner complexities, from solar systems to black holes and the different organisms that dwell the planet Earth, and the poor little phone that's barely 6 inches in height. Not only that it's inconceivable size-wise, but taking into account that the former emerged from complete nothingness, and the latter is the fusion of the already 4 existent elements. So let's take one more step back to understand how we started believing in these absurdities. Now, if it's that clear that the universe couldn't have just spawned out of complete nothingness, why some good chunk of people still renounce their own religious beliefs? Through which almost everybody got introduced to the concept of a creator. And to answer that question, we are going to look at the different factors that contributed to the decline of religiosity, especially among Gen Zers. If you think, for example, how you came to be Christian, Jew, Muslim, or whatever it may be, the answer will most probably be that you were born into one of these households and thus you were indoctrinated with these very certain set of beliefs. Therefore, you're Christian, Jew, or even Muslim. And whenever you ask the question about the authenticity of your own creed, you usually get reprimanded and admonished, and you are immediately told to just have faith. Or do you want to go to hellfire and dwell in eternal damnation? And this is the superficial transmission of these beliefs that causes a person to question or even doubt the existence of a creator and thus leave the folds of the faith altogether. Another very important reason is that some extremist groups usually use religion as a crutch to justify their own terrorism and corruption by cherry-picking some scriptural verses. At that point, the younger generation tends to leap into conclusions and absolve themselves from these groups and absolve themselves from the religion they adhere to altogether, without even confirming the information by taking the time to do some proper research about what they heard. I mean, are you expecting a generation of TikTokies to sit for an hour or something and do some proper research about some certain topic? This would be one of the world's wonders. At the age of the internet, where you have access to literally every single different viewpoint out there, you're no longer bound to what your parents indoctrinate you with. Do you want to worship a cow? Sure. You can find some Discord server of cow worshippers that you can join. Or you'd rather worship a cat. I mean, look at how irresistible they are. Look at their beautiful little cute eyes. We've got you covered, don't worry. There is probably some Telegram group of cat worshippers that you can join. Or you might just want to not worship anything and live for your own pleasure. Whatever it may be, there is probably some community out there that shares the same interests and thoughts. And at an age where deep knowledge is lacking, you can literally influence anybody with a little bit of resources and a little bit of rhetoric. And that's why you can find a lot of atheist people on the internet with a little bit of rhetoric and a little bit of music slapped in the background, being able to influence a big chunk of religious people and deviate them to atheism. Ever since the age of Enlightenment and the Renaissance, people started using science as an instrument to challenge the already existing religious beliefs. And the lay people like you and me would listen to what the intellectuals have to say and follow their own lead. But the problem is that the primary call in those ages was anchored towards individualism and humanism. And in layman terms, man as the center of existence and man's pleasure shall be prioritized even over religion. And something that I commonly notice, which you, by the way, shall take it with a grain of salt, because it's not factual or backed up with evidence or anything. I don't have any articles for this. I'm not trying to play the game of influence. And the thinking patterns of such people is as follows. If I understand the dynamics of how something works, then that thing must not have a starter. Is that how we even use the word? You know what I mean, a creator. But this is like saying I already understand how the phone works. Like the processor communicates with the motherboard, and this part speaks with this part, and that part speaks with this part. So it must have come around in any way, but never. It's impossible that it has a creator or it has an inventor. Now, we are going to talk about one of the most important cornerstones in modern biology. And you may wonder, why the change in accent all of a sudden? And that's because we're going to talk about Sir Charles Darwin. You know, because his English and stuff. When Darwin published his work in 1859 on the origins of species, that created a lot of buzz and controversy between theists that already believe in creationism and atheists that now believe in an origin of common ancestry. And that was a big kick under the belt for the religious communities in Europe, especially after some religious establishments like the Catholic Church started accepting and complying with the theory. Take Pope Francis, for example, and his declaration that the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution don't contradict the concept of a creator, but rather complement it and require it.
Pope Francis has said the Big Bang Theory is compatible with the Catholic Church's teaching on creation. Speaking to members of the Pontifical Academy of Science, the Pope said it is possible to believe in both, insisting God was responsible for the Big Bang from which all life evolved.
L'inizio del mondo non è opera del caos che deve a un altro la sua origine, ma deriva direttamente da un principio supremo che crea per amore. Il Big Bang, che oggi si pone all'origine del mondo, non contraddice l'intervento creatore divino, ma lo esige. L'evoluzione nella natura non contrasta con la nozione di creazione, perché l'evoluzione presuppone la creazione degli esseri che si evolvono.
The Pope's remarks were in line with the Catholic Church's teaching of the last few decades.
And how some went and reinterpreted the scripture in light of the theory. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you everybody for tuning in for our new episode. This is The Midnight Show and I'm your host Mahmoud. And tonight we're having a very special guest. A guest that has been always on fire. Welcome, Mr. Charles Darwin. Thank you so much for the intriguing introduction. Today we are having two very simple questions that have been raised over Twitter with 5, or we shall call it X now because it is in its second phase of evolution. So we are having two very important questions, straightforward questions that have been raised with 500,000 likes. So shall we start? You're funny as always, mister. So the first question that I have here says, why did you author this work? Go ahead, sir. Sir, I am already aware that you believe that we have developed from apes and monkeys and stuff, but you don't have to prove that to me in front of everybody. We have millions of people watching. Okay, that might be a little bit of a difficult question, so we're going to keep it for later. And now I'm going to ask you the easier question. If you were to come back to life, would you still author this work? Thank you so much, sir, for the useless answer. And as always, that was Mahmoud from The Midnight Show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, and have a good night. Good night, America.